works alone, his hands defiling the bodies of the dead in his thirst for knowledge and power. His name is Adam Crowley, a man who was once respected in the field of science, until fate led him along another path, towards black magic. Now he is in possession of the mythical Lost Diary of Samuel Pepys, a volume that contains the detestable rituals of the demon-worshipping Brotherhood of Hecate. Soon, he will complete his work. Tonight, as the sun sets on London one last time, he will unleash his demonic brood onto the streets. And should no one stop him, this city will be consumed by a horde of nightmare creatures.
Greetings collectors and welcome to today's retro game review. Today I thought I'd raid my PlayStation horror collection to unearth a game that divided opinion upon its release back in 1997. Picture the scene. It's London, 1666, and a demon-worshipping brotherhood with sinister ambitions on world domination is up to no good. One of the Brotherhood's order goes against the Brotherhood and burns down the building and halls of London in turn, later to be known as the Great Fire of London. The backstory is somewhat mixed with elements of true history and real-life locations. Skip forward to 1834, and mad scientist and new head of the Order of the Brotherhood called Adam Crowley is experimenting with cadavers to create nightmare creatures in order to take over the world. Crowley reads a manuscript by real-world Samuel Pepys, best known for his diary, in order to attempt to create a magic elixir. The result is actually the potion that creates the hideous creatures that he will unleash upon London and then the rest of the world. So far, so good. This is a horror story that could really go somewhere, far better than your average monster hunt. To combat the Brotherhood's plans, two heroes, Ignatius and Nadia, are dispatched to stop him. This is where the game starts going a bit awry. You'll start off near the graveyard and it won't be long before you encounter your first enemy. To add in some variety, the game does involve activating switches to open up new paths, and also a range of pickups including health, potions and ammunition. The gun pickup is particularly useful. You'll only have a limited number of bullets, but the weapon is strong enough to one-shot many of the nightmare creatures. On first glance, nightmare creatures looks like an instant crowd pleaser. There's two things that really get in the way of all of this though. That's the camera angles and the erratic control system. If I first explain the control method, it's very much like the tank controls that you experience in the original Resident Evil. For this type of game, it really doesn't seem to be a natural fit though. Often you'll find yourself turned the wrong way and it can seem like a real mission to steer your character into the right direction. This isn't game breaking, but it's certainly less than ideal. I would have much preferred the ability to run in any direction, much more like the style of Mario 64. The control system is functional, but seems very dated when you revisit this game. The second element to make this game less than perfect is the camera. Sometimes it's almost right over your shoulder, and at other times it swings and sways rapidly. The overall effect when combined with the rigid character movement can be quite unsettling. At times I physically experience motion sickness whilst playing due to the presentation. The action itself is at best average. There is a rudimentary combo system, and it can be fun to slice your foes in half. In practice, it turns out to be a bit of a button masher at times, but there's still fun to be had here. The game also has some good ideas. There is a story throughout the game as you track down Crowley. You'll also be able to change weapons in the later stages of the game. So, what about those nightmare creatures? Again, I'm slightly on the fence here. You'll face the standard zombies, werewolves and miscellaneous hulking masses. I have to admit, I did like some touches, such as having to dismember the monsters that look like Jack the Ripper. It's also satisfying to one-shot certain flying enemies. I'm not sure if I'm being too critical of the game or not. There are some clearly reskinned and reused enemies, and overall not as great a variety as you might have expected from a game called Nightmare Creatures. With a game title such as this, you have to be sure to deliver a good range of monsters. In truth, I'm not so certain that I received enough monster for my money. It's also clear that not all of the bugs were removed from the final game, as it is possible to pull infinite combos on some of the creatures. Also, this being a PlayStation 1 game, the graphics have aged really badly in places. The creatures themselves look very generic, and there can be some very noticeable polygon clipping in narrow areas. Even back in 1997, there are a great number of games that had already cracked these issues. There are also some elements of the game that may frustrate you. Firstly, the jump mechanism. You can jump using the triangle, but the animation feels very forced and doesn't quite sync with the distance covered. It feels almost spongy, and it can be quite difficult to handle. Again, it is workable, but I found that the spongy jumping combined with the camera sway quite nauseating after a while. Secondly is the fire. Later in the game you'll be in burning buildings. The fire actually looks very good as an effect. Until you step in it, you'll be burnt to a crisp within seconds and really harshly punished. This would have been fine if the control system were a little more responsive and the camera in a consistent enough position to be able to see where you're safe. Instead, it's all a bit of a mess. Combine this with having to jump over the fire, you feel that you're really battling the developer far more than the nightmare creatures themselves. The physical packaging of Nightmare Creatures is well presented. It's suitably gothic and not too much to complain about. In terms of pricing, currently you can pick this one up for around £10 British or around $15 US with some room to negotiate. There are a few art variations by region and console, so I'd suggest choosing your favourite. I may have sounded a bit down about Nightmare Creatures, and that's because I wanted it to be so much more than it is. I often see very positive reviews of the game, but I can't help but feel that a level of nostalgia is needed here to look past some of the game's shortcomings. To its credit, the game does have a story arc, and the last level fighting Crowley on top of a burning Westminster Abbey is very memorable. Again, be prepared to be a little patient, as Crowley is not just overpowered, he's virtually unstoppable. Would I recommend Nightmare Creatures? Perhaps not. Even at the fairly low collector's price point, the cash is probably better invested elsewhere. The game isn't broken, it just needs the player to meet it halfway. I can see what the game designers were trying to do. The execution just lets this good idea down a bit though. To this day, the game does still have its fans, so don't just take my word for it. Give this one a try if you can hunt down a cheap copy. It's certainly not all bad, and there are some good jump scares and reasonable action to be had here. However, it's a little buggy in places and may not appeal to those with low patience levels. Until next time, I'll be here finishing off this Nightmare Creature. Hello again, I hope you enjoyed today's show and thank you for the view. Remember, you can always comment, like, subscribe and find us on the social media sites below. Happy collecting!